Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Old Brother, a podcast about Salford/Manchester's legendary musical institution, The Fall. Each week we invite along a guest to chat about their experiences and memories of the group. I'm sure you know you can find us at Spotify and Apple and all the usual suspects, but we're hosted at play.acast.com/s/Old Brother. You can also get all episodes on YouTube. You can search for Old Brother Podcast and subscribe so you'll never miss one. This week we're joined by TV presenter, DJ, author and my St Bede's alumnus Terry Christian, who joins us to discuss his memories of watching and working with the group. Apparently I had some issues with my mic here, but I rarely say anything of note, so it shouldn't spoil their enjoyment too much. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Old Brother, a podcast about the fall with me, Paul Hanley, and my esteemed brother Stephen. Say hello, Steve.
Hello.
Is that it?
You said say hello.
Hello. Anyway, our guest today, we're delighted. No, rubbish. Our guest today is the esteemed Manchester journalist, TV presenter, and DJ, Mr. Terry Christian. Good afternoon, Terry. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm good.
Hello. Are you all right?
Mired in the past. 61. You'd believe that about me, eh?
I can't believe it. Looking at you, I can't believe you're 61.
Never had to work for a living.
Yeah.
You're not dyeing your hair. It's not Johnny Marr Black, is it?
It was, and then I just decided, give that one a rest. It wasn't fooling anybody.
What are you trying to say about Johnny Marr, Paul?
No, nothing. No. Well, I mean, I think he's probably turned grey overnight after Morrissey's latest letter. I think.
Morrissey having a go at him, yeah.
Did you see that?
No, but I mean, again, if it was my hair, it would have turned grey by listening to all my own solo albums.
Yeah,
I did like Down on the Corner though, off the Johnny Marr and the Healers album. I just find, I quite his stuff's all right. I wouldn't get overexcited about it.
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather Johnny Marr stuff than Morrissey
live
stuff.
though. It's good live.
I quite like Morrissey's stuff. I mean, they should re-record some of them old Smiths ones, though, shouldn't they? Like one where that goes, I would go out tonight if I could find a black shirt to wear.
If I could find a shirt that fits, I think he'd be singing these days, wouldn't he? And anyway, welcome to the latest episode of the Smiths podcast with me and Steve.
I could talk about them all day as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, much as I'd enjoy that, I think we're going to have to bring up the subject of The Fall. So we were talking last week, and I believe that you first saw The Fall supporting magazine in October 1977 at Rafters, is that right?
Yeah, Rafters. And in fact, it was around the same time we went through a flurry of gigs, went to see Steel Pulse. That might have been maybe a month later at Manchester Poly. That was only £1. Rafters is a weird place because most bands it was like £1.20, then Elvis Costello £1.50. Remember going to see Dillinger there, £1.75. But we wanted to see magazine because of the Buzzcocks connection. Yeah. And The Fall, really, we wouldn't have taken any notice of who the support band was, except for the fact that a mate of mine, Terry Ryan, his younger sister, Teresa, was at Notre Dame, the old girls' Catholic Catholic grammar school in Cheetham Hill, and she was best mates with Maureen Baines. His big sister was Una Baines, who was in The Fall. So again, it was that kind of idea of, because I'd known John Marr out of Buzzcocks. It was that idea of, we can now touch people who are sort of famous. I mean, it was a different thing. People can't imagine what Manchester was like before that era. How we were kind of a bit nothing in a way.
Yeah. It's definitely. Well, I was going to say, did you never get to the Electric Circus then, Terry? Because the first time Steve saw The Fall was like earlier the same month, at the last night of the Electric Circus.
No, not at all. I mean, you've got to remember, we had no money. I lived in the Manchester 16 postcode. You had no chance of getting a Saturday job. The minute they saw M16, they just thought you were a thief. And it's true. We used to have the highest insurance rates, in like sort of Manchester because of that postcode back in the day,
Right.
So I never really had any money, so people who went out had money. I can remember, the first forays that we made, to places like Rafters. The great thing about punk for us was you could drink underage. And also it was fairly cheap. So you get him for like £1.20, go and see some rubbish, like the Radio Stars. We used to love going to see Deaf School, actually. They were our favourite band, from Liverpool at the time. Yeah. And then And then beer prices were cheap, and then a taxi. If 5 of us got a taxi from town, it was like cheaper than the bus fare in. It was like 20p each.
Get you?
Well, we live so near. You know, I mean, I was about a mile from the city centre.
Sorry, Steve.
Had you been going to gigs before that, like at the Free Trade Hall and the Opera House and the?
No, not at all. Because again, it was down to affordability. So, I mean, my first gigs were those punk gigs, and it was going to see freebies. Bands like Gags playing at the Midland. Oh no, the Cavalcade. That was it in Didsbury. And stuff like that. So yeah, there were kids who did go to those sort of gigs and would go and see like Roxy Music and see this band and see that band. But I just never had the money like they did.
Where did you get your money? You had a job, didn't you, Steve?
Pardon?
You had a job.
I had a job. I was just going to say I was worked at a hotel in Sale, and Gags had a residency there.
Yeah, but you're older than me again, aren't you?
A bit older than you, yeah. A couple of
years.
Yeah.
So you would have had money. I mean, it was just one of those weird things, in the sixth form at Beeds, the only money I had was from working, and it was a good job at Esso in Trafford Park over the summer. And that was brilliant because, it's Transport and General Workers Union rates, even got £1 a day luncheon vouchers.
Blimey.
And it did help that my dad was the shop steward as well.
Right. So was he a big union guy then, your dad?
Eh?
Was he a big union guy, your dad, I presume?
Yeah, well, I mean, on a very pragmatic level. So the thing that he did at Esso in Trafford Park, because he'd just be like what they call a plant operator, labourer. So, they used to roll barrels off the ships before they had the direct pipeline to Milford Haven because it was on the docks. Yeah. And then they'd have like plants where they'd be filling like antifreeze, gear oil when they used to have that automatic transmission fluid, and all these different lines, and then, drive a forklift truck and, pack things by, stack things by hand as well. Yeah. But what they used to do, because they were so busy, all the blokes would have to work 1 in 3 Saturdays. And what my dad did was he went to the bosses there, he said, yes, we'll work the 1 in 3 Saturdays, but instead of an hour for lunch, we'll have 45 minutes, and then we'll still do the 1 in 3 Saturdays to make, because we won't need to make up our hours, but that will be time and a half. Now, that was real socialism, wasn't it?
Of course it was, yeah. I mean, similar to me dad. My dad worked at Dunlop's on Upper Cambridge Street, so not far from you, really. So he was a charge hand there. So probably very similar experience, I would have thought. He, that kind of, like you say, that pragmatic kind of socialism.
Yeah, and that's what's been lost. Whereas when our Kevin, it was the year above you, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
At St. Bede's. When our Kev was like the union rep at A-Town Street, when he was working in the Dole office there, when they wanted to sort out temp workers, they got some bloke floated in from the local trade union. He said, right, before we have the meeting, can we all agree that we fully support the Sandinistas in Nicaragua?
Yeah, he talks about that. Mark Steele, when he first joined the Socialist Workers' Party, you'd have the first 2 hours of the meeting would be saying, "Can we, what's the feminist angle on the wages? On the papers." So they never actually got anything done. It was all sort of that. So were you still at St. Bede's when you were on that Devil's Advocate? Were you? No,
I not left then. That was quite a while later. So I was like 20, 21 when I was on that.
Right. Okay. Because who we were just mentioning, Johnny Marr, he was on that as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was 17. We used to chat to him because he had like the Echo and the Bunnyman haircut going on,
He did. He was like the big man on campus at Withenshaw College where I was, Johnny Marr.
Well, he got really upset when he moaned on it. He said the only thing he didn't like about being on the dole was like the low dole money, but he actually liked being on the dole because he could practice his guitar all day. And Gus MacDonald was disgusted with him and told him off. And he was nearly crying, Johnny, after that.
Wow, he was right though, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but I was quite surprised that I thought, that's just part of the ding dong. That's what it is. You get stick, then you've got to come back at it.
Yeah, well, not everyone's as good at that as you, Terry.
No, what it wasn't so much that. It was just like you can't stick your big bottom lip out, and that's what surprised me. Lads from Withenshaw went down in my estimation after seeing him do that.
Excuse me.
Watch it. Right, so that was said. In case anybody didn't know, that Devil's Advocate, it was a bit like Question Time, sort of, wasn't it? But for young people.
Well, the weird thing was, it was made by the World in Action team, and it was networked at 20 to 7 on a Sunday night. So everybody saw it, because the only other things that were on the telly at the time, 3 channels, were the Money Programme and Songs of Praise.
Yeah.
So I got more fanboys. Well, yeah, I think a bit later on, but it was kind of, it was in a time slot where everybody watched it.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because it was quite uncut, and it was all based on the findings of the Scarman report after the riots of 1981. And the reason they chose Manchester was that Thatcher's reform, Thatcher's, policies of lifting tariffs on textile imports and manufacturing goods had destroyed our industry in Manchester. So Manchester went from a place of quite high employment for young people to virtually no employment for anyone between the ages of 16 and 21. So it was just talking about stuff like, the riots, and it was, the high levels of youth unemployment, the sus laws, which are kind of coming back again, nuclear weapons, blah, 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 all sorts of stuff, and then fascinating for people to watch, because someone would tune in and see some lad from Hardwick going, the trouble with when you go to school here is you don't learn you nothing. that is great Sunday evening viewing. And then because as you know, me being ex-St. Bede's and very well read and articulate. As
we all are.
I was accused of being a plant, a Trotskyist plant.
Blimey. Well, I mean, that whole thing, you could get into that whole thing of like working class intelligence, because that's something that ties into the fall and Mark, I think. That idea that...
very well done there, Paul.
Thank you very much. You can be firmly working class, but still highly intelligent, and not, and it seems to be now that it's harder. People don't believe it anymore. I don't know why. I think
I think the last people that anyone's able to pick on are the working classes. I mean, I've basically had it for 40 years working in the media. Because it's kind of, you're lauded and then you're never judged on your CV. So, it kind of gets you down a bit. What was fascinating about Marquis Smith for me when I met him, because, the Fall, you've got to remember there were loads of other bands around that I kind of preferred because I liked to tune back in the day, and I was never a fan of stuff like...
What are you saying?
I was never a fan of stuff like Captain Beefheart, but then...
Captain Beefheart. Hated Captain Beefheart.
I remember I loved Totally Wired, so I bought that. Then I bought How I Wrote the Elastic Man. And then when I went to Derby, I remember thinking, I can afford it now. So I bought Lie Dream of a Casino Soul, which had come out fairly recently. But then I remember one of the first times I interviewed Mark, and I was chatting to him about the song Lie Dream of a Casino Soul. And I said, the guy who did the Northern Soul slot on my show on BBC Radio Derby, Dave Evison, it was like the ex-Wigan Casino, the oldies DJ there.
Yeah.
When I said to him, have you heard this? He said, heard it. He said, I bought 3 copies of it in case it becomes worth something one day.
You never actually listened to it.
You still got them. That actually tickled Mark. Ironically, that's probably true, but it's worth about 30 quid now, isn't it?
Tell me about it. Some of them records, there was one came up the other day, and it was like...
Yeah, ridiculous, wasn't it?
Yeah. Because I've got nothing. Have you, Steve?
It's £150 or something. It was going.
Oh, which one was that?
It was.
I can't remember what it was now.
This Nation's Saving Grace. First pressing or something.
Oh my God! You see, the weird thing is, because once I started working on BBC Radio Derby from '82, and then I interviewed
for nothing.
But I got everything of yours for now. From then on, up until the mid-90s. So it was, probably the late 90s. And even then I'd still get Chuck stuff, like, You Are Missing Winner. And they seem to avalanche out about 2 a year, or it seemed to me later on down the line. But so I would have said that the fullest catalogue of any band other than maybe Curtis Mayfield that I had, but I never had his singles, was The Fall.
Yeah.
Accidentally, almost. And in some ways, it's only maybe been the last 10 years or so that I've started to go, they're really good, aren't they? I always liked you, but I found some of the live experiences hard work. Like, it was a great gig at the Blue Note Club on the Hex Induction Tour. So that was the first night, Mark Smith came in on our radio show. puked up in a waste paper basket because he said he'd eaten some rotten bacon, and then was on for like 30 minutes. And we even played the classical. You could play what you wanted on the radio in those days. And then me and this girl who helped out on the show, Ros Vexy, we went over to the Blessington, which is a pub across the road, very nice, director's pub, real ale, and settled in there with Mark till about 10 o'clock because he didn't need to do sound checks. That's what you lads did.
Well, he might grace us with 5 minutes, of shouting at the sound man, but it wasn't an extensive experience sound checking with Mark normally.
Yeah, well, he did say that, but when he's had a few drinks and he was there chatting about, I'd die for the lads. I'd die for those lads,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You go, yeah, great.
He nearly did a couple of times.
I'd do anything for the lads. I'd die for them. You know what I mean?
Well, that ex-induction hour tour was probably the closest that lineup were. It kind of tapered off towards the end of that year, but when we did ex-induction hour, we were pretty tight then, weren't we, Steve?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody loved that gig, and again, I was like, wow, because I'd seen you before, and you were really good at Tiffany's when it was you, the Distractions, and the things were billed. So either we arrived too late and missed them, because again, they were a Liverpool band, weren't they? But John Marr, who I'd gone to school with, primary and secondary school, he was supposed to be playing with them, and I don't know if they even played that night. Obviously that was a great night though, and a great gig.
Are you sure that wasn't the Things that John Marr was playing with?
Yeah. No, he was supposed to be, yeah, but I don't know if they turned up on the night, because when we arrived, it was the Distractions, then you. But
Where was Tiffany's?
It was at Tiffany's in town, so above rafters. But it was bigger, or was it Fagan's? It was one of them.
Yes, Fagan's. Yeah, I
remember you were virtually all just spread out on the floor in front of us. There didn't seem to be much of a stage there.
Stage in there. Well, that gig we played with the Distractions, that was the first two-drummer gig. That was the first time we did it, so we didn't really know what the hell we were doing.
But I think that was all the time of Grotesque, because with
just slightly later than that. But yeah, that was that Frank Fagan's gig was the first two-drummer gig, and then that overlapped next year. We did Ex-Induction Hour.
Yeah, that's right, because it was 81. But I did think, wow, they're a really good band. They're really good now.
Yeah, I think we were better live. I think we were better live then than some of the records. I think.
It's hard to say, because obviously, I remember I did have Grotesque on a cassette. Someone had taped it for me.
Yeah.
We had that, So again, a lot of stuff you'd catch up with later, because the amount of products you put out, until I was like working at Radio Derby and earning money, and then obviously I got a lot of records for free, and I was an expert at tracking down all the stuff that I wanted. So all the labels that you happen to be with, I had good relationships with, with like people like Terry Hollingsworth at Beggars, the guys at Rough Trade, Brenda Kelly when she ran the Independent Label Association, and I used to get, sorted out for like, reggae labels like the Fashion label in London and Green Sleeves and all that, so I was a real hustler. I was a real kind of scrounger like that.
Yeah. So how long were you at Radio Derby then?
6.5 years. But it was good for me, because it was kind of almost all my ambitions were fulfilled anyway, because I had my own radio show that was very groundbreaking. It had won 2 National Sony Radio Awards, for the best specialist music show. I got into all the gigs free within that massive area. Put gigs on myself, including you lot at Tiffany's in Derby on Babington Lane. That was July 83.
They weren't all called Tiffany's. That's 2 Tiffany's.
No, maybe I'm getting Fagan's and Tiffany's mixed up, but it was definitely Tiffany's in Derby, because it was quite a big space. And we put you on there and put this local band who were a bit like a third-rate version of the Birthday Party called Canker Opera on supporting you. And it was the first time I'd ever met Bricks, because she wasn't in the band, but she was hanging around with Mark backstage. And Mark had gone from being really friendly to me, towards me, to being a little bit cutting, because he thought that I hadn't sorted the BBC out to pay you enough, and your rider wasn't great, and you'd been put up in the Friary Hotel, which was okay, but it was, it was all of this kind of stuff. And then he punched the lead singer, Nick Jackson, in the face.
Oh, why?
Because apparently he was being accused of stealing his cigarettes And what was great was as I walked in to say hello to Mark, Nick Jackson was walking past me going, "Don't talk to me about the effing industrial estate. You are the industrial estate." Which was a bit crap, but sounded funny.
Not the best insult, I suppose. No,
but with Derby, that was quite good. It's not a natural thing with the locals there, you know, that kind of repartee. So but that wasn't bad, really.
That was, well, it kind of got up to be a bit like Mark Ocasely, but he wasn't normally.
No.
I don't remember hitting anybody. Do you see?
No.
Not then.
No, it was just him. So it was like, it was backstage. I just remember that he was moaning a bit about the rider. And, then the fags had been stolen, and I think he'd run out of fags or something. So that was it. That was the first glimmer I got of that side of him. I mean, but it was all right. I wasn't bothered. You know, it wasn't me, was it?
No. So he went a bit off with you then, but you got on with him very well over the years, though, didn't you? I think. Well,
the weird thing is because I really admired him, because the one thing I never had was that level of massive confidence. I always needed, I'm the fourth of six kids. I always needed a certain amount of validation. Oh, that was funny, Terry. Oh, that was good. Blah blah blah. Whereas, like, Mark didn't need that validation. He didn't need anyone to tell him he was great, did he? He sort of just felt like he was, which is very unusual for anybody who's working class. I mean, obviously, it could be bordering on narcissism. Yeah. I mean, Tony Wilson was like that as well, but, Tony Wilson was a different form of thinking he was great to Mark's. I mean, what I did like about Mark, though, was that he was very observant about stuff, and he could often see through all the. Or it seemed to me at that age, you could see through all the bull to what was at the centre of it. But we used to argue about politics. We used to chat about stuff, have a laugh about stuff. He used to really take the mickey out of me all the time. When I'd interview him about the fact that once I'd had 2 pints, I could never remember the names of your weird songs, on the hotel. Boudel, and he'd be going, "Oh God, again!" You know what I mean? So he liked that opportunity to be able to take the piss, and the fact that I would find it funny anyway. But our normal kind of semi-pub crawl, because what I'd do is every time you release a new album. So the first time we did it was Room to Live, and so I rang up. Kay Carroll set it up, and so I met him with a tape recorder, a tape recorder. They're really heavy. Which was like BBC standard issue, in Tommy Duck's in Manchester. Saturday lunchtime, midday, chucked a few down in there, Green or Whitley's Bitter. Yeah, then we went to the Britain's Protection and had a few in there. Then at 3 o'clock when they booted us out, we went to Effie's, that Turkish place in St. Peter's Square. Yeah. And then, I had like kebab and chips, and then we went and ended up, for some weird reason, I think I was getting I was staying at my mum's that night, ended up in the beer cellar on the approach road at 5 o'clock or whenever they opened up again.
That was a rough house, that was.
Well, I mean, you never thought of that. I mean, it's hard to think of places being a rough house when you're from, when you're from like Brooks Bar like me. Yeah. And I mean, Winshore's not that soft. How can you go around saying that's a rough house? No,
but even then.
Did you actually get an interview in between all that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I used to feel about. I mean, I'm so gutted I haven't got them, because I do some fantastic stuff. And I used to get, not outtakes, because we just put it out there. I remember once asking him about, there was stuff in the press saying that Robert Smith out of The Cure didn't like him, and, Morrissey had just come out and said he didn't like him. And I was saying, well, what do you think of that? He said, well, as far as Robert Smith's concerned, he said, this is probably just something, that he's heard about him. He said, but I don't like him anyway. And then he said, as for Morrissey, He goes, again, this is just something he's heard from people around him, that I don't like him, so he doesn't like me. I've never said any such thing. And I said to him, so well, what do you think of Morrissey then? He said, as far as I'm concerned, he's just a fucking paranoid
Nice.
He's just a boy George with short hair.
We'll beep that, Terry.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make any difference. That went out on BBC Radio Derby back in 1982.
Wow. Well, I mean, if you could play the classical, I'm sure that
nobody cared in those days. When you were doing a program that was on the fringes, the first couple of records would put off anyone who would complain, and then you were just allowed to get on with it. So and our producers didn't care either. So we'd play every song we played had effing and jeffing and all sorts in. It was a proper show, mate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is that thing. Sorry, Steve.
I was going to say, you're back on there now, are you?
Well, I just did 5 shows for the 40th anniversary. So I did actually play, I think I played Kick a Conspiracy by the 4. But, I mean, we played loads of 4 on that show because we were on, 5 nights a week. Then it went to 4 nights a week, but a longer show. So, the 4, all those Manchester bands were our staples, really.
Yeah.
Well, for me, because obviously, even in a place like Derby, it's something that's cool and not from London. So there was always a lot of Liverpool bands around, a lot of Manchester bands, in the 80s that were of interest. And then we play like, jazz funk imports, reggae prees. We play all sorts.
Yeah. So, because that was kind of a crossover thing that I don't think that many people do. I mean, I know Peel did it a bit, but playing black music and white music alongside each other, I don't think you get it quite so much now, do you?
Well, I mean, the kind of stuff that we played, you've got to remember, I brought in other specialists. So I had an Northern Soul slot. I had a guy, Devon Daly, who did our jazz funk, and we'd play all the new black music that was coming out at the time. It was electro, hip hop, house, garage. So we had all of that, and it was almost like me going to university. So I learned off these people, and I always had a very eclectic taste in music anyway. I mean, to me, I don't do genres. As far as I'm concerned, there's only 2 genres, good and bad. Yeah. And I'm not interested in anything watered down or messed about with. I hate it when they go, well, it's a kind of like, Afro-Celt jazz fusion. I go, well, I'm going to hate it.
I like a bit of Afro-Celt jazz fusion. It's not the same.
I like a bit of Afro. I like a tiny bit of jazz. Not into the fusion bit.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And I'm into the Celtic stuff, but I'm not into the fusion. I like it as it is. You know what I mean? So, and on the funk side, I was always like a bit, I love going out. We used to go to places like Rotters, went to Legends in the old days, in Manchester, when Friday, Saturday night, it'd be all like great music, all the kind of jazz funk stuff that they play at Wigan Pier, it's like early Cameo, Maze, Slave.
I never made that cross the road from Rafters to Rotters, I must admit.
As a bass player, Steve would have loved all that stuff like Pleasure, Glide by Pleasure, Aura, Slave. I mean, the bass lines in those songs were the best.
Right. We'll take your word for that, Terry.
Send them, yeah. I'll send you links. Get educated. It's never too late.
Never too late to educate me. No. Okay.
You'll be able to join a certain ratio.
We're talking about a certain ratio with somebody. We were talking about the Manchester music scene, it being a bit everyone was a bit standoffish with each other. I mean, apart from Buzzcocks, who sort of helped everybody, nobody else seemed to like each other that much. Like, New Order and Certain Ratio and The Fall, everyone kind of kept each other at arm's length a bit, which was difficult to do because we all use the same PA company.
And you'd all end up drinking in the same places.
Yeah. And the thing is, Certain Ratio are the nicest bunch of people in the world when you meet them years later.
Yeah, well, they were weird. I remember when I first moved to Derby, New Order played in the February, but obviously you knew that they weren't going to do interviews. But I didn't know you had to set interviews up. So when a Certain Ratio played, I just went toddling down there with a Ewer tape recorder. And then after they came off stage and went backstage, said, "Hi, I'm Terry from the BBC. I'm here to do an interview." And they were going, so they talked to me for ages, but they talked to me for ages about why they didn't do interviews, the philosophy behind it all, which didn't sound very convincing to me, and I was arguing, saying, well, that just sounds like rubbish, I'm from a council estate in like Brooks Bar. I've only been at the BBC about 2 months. I'm not exactly, Steve Wright in the afternoon. I'm not even sure he was, I'm not anyone famous. I said, I'm down here because I'm a fan and I play your stuff, and you won't give me an interview. Why not? And then eventually they got down to this thing and said, look, we're just for the people. And I went, so if you're for the people, how come you're playing in the most exclusive club in Derby, the Blue Note, and charging £3.50 a ticket?
£3.50 in them days? That's a lot of money,
to get in. to get in. And this club, the Blue Note, was 90p a pint in those days, which was more expensive than anywhere in Manchester. Anyway, and then some bloke who I've seen sort of tour managing New Order and all those over the years, his face, he just looked at me and said, listen, they told you they're not doing a fucking interview, so now fuck off. But in a really threatening manner.
Right.
So I did. And then the next day, furious about my undermining of my BBC status, I rang up the factory offices. And this bloke's on the line and he's saying, okay. He said, right. He said, well, look, he said, listen, and I told him the story, and all my outrage about, I'm the man of the people, not them playing for £3.50 in an exclusive club. And he went, listen, he said, I know you are. And I was like, oh, a bit taken aback. I said, yeah. And he said, and I know what your problem is. And I said, well, what's that? He said, you've got too much to fucking say. Anyway, it's Rob Gretton. Rob Gretton. And he'd been in my big brother's class at St. Bede's.
Right, okay.
Back in the day. So, anyway.
I didn't know Rob went to Bede's as well, did he?
Yeah, but he left in the 5th year. So he was one of the Wythenshawe mob. So our Tony's best mates were these two brothers, the Hennessy's, who used to play in like a Cayley band, and they were from Wythenshawe. Right. And then another lad called Mike Doyle or Steve Doyle, who was from Wythenshawe as well. So they used to all come on a special bus from Wythenshawe to Bede's every day. But anyway, so after that, I actually got put on the mailing list for all the factory record stuff. Right. And Alan Erasmus even drove down to Derby twice to hand deliver stuff to me.
Blimey. Well, I think
covers rubbish records,
But, I think New Order were slightly badly burned by interviews, weren't they? I don't think they were very good at it when they started, so I think they got kind of set up. As
they weren't doing them at all in that era. The first time I did an interview with them was I interviewed Barney for Technique, and he was sound. Yeah, he was all right.
But Joy Division didn't do interviews, did they?
I get it. I mean, it's before my time, and again with Joy Division, I wasn't like a massive fan. In fact, I've still got the cassette where I recorded Unknown Pleasures that I borrowed off a mate of mine, and on the other side was like reggae hits, but it's all like the old ska ones, like Young, Gifted, and Black, and the Monkey. Okay. So there you go. I've got 2 albums all fitted on one nice Memorex
C90.
Yeah.
So well, I mean, to be fair, from listening to that, then I got into Joy Division a bit, but I was never like that massive fan of theirs. I mean, I liked them and I liked those individual tracks, but I remember I saw them supporting the Buzzcocks at the Apollo, and again, I thought they were a bit like, they reminded me of like the sort of bands that punk was all about getting rid of.
Really? That would Joy Division, wouldn't it? Supporting Buzzcocks at the Apollo.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because the songs went on a bit too long, and it was like, do you know what I mean? It was like, and it didn't sound like that record, did it? It was all like a bit heavy metal-ish.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, they weren't
all that drumming and what have you.
Like they were on record live. They were.
No. I mean, they were quite powerful, but it was like, this is a bit uncomfortable. This might be like watching, one of those rock bands that we're not supposed to like anymore. It was a very strange era to grow up in, especially when you were like teenage. I remember like everyone moaning about the Stranglers saying, and he's 27. You know what I mean? Anybody over the age of anyone over the age of 21, it should have been, been euthanized.
Well, you see, I've got this theory.
That's funny. That's funny because it was like that when you were in a band. I always thought, I'm going to have to give this up by the time I'm 30. I can't be in a band when I'm 30. That's way too old.
Yeah, I mean, well, the weird thing was, it was anyone was old if they happened to be white, unless we were Lou Reed.
Yeah.
But it was okay to be a black guy and be in your 30s. You know what I mean? Like Bobby Bland or whatever, James Brown.
Yeah.
Well, in his 40s probably at that time. But so it was kind of weird like that. But yeah, it did redefine this idea of what is and isn't cool, and that became really important for about 5 years. And looking back on it, you think, oh God, it's so geeky.
Yeah, well, I've got this theory that people of Steve's age and slightly older pretended that they didn't like stuff pre-1976, that it was all crap, whereas people who were of my age, who were slightly younger, believed that shite and ended up, just listening to new wave. Whereas they were saying, "Oh no, it's all shit that went before," but they all still had $1 billion Babies and all the Bowie albums and Roxy Music and everything else stashed behind the latest Jam album.
Well, to be fair, Alice Cooper, was all right. I always liked. I tried to learn the harmonic a bit of Generation Landslide, and then what is it? And then obviously, that other stuff wasn't it. The stuff that was uncool at the time was Pink Floyd. You know what I mean? Not
Genesis.
Sid Barrett stuff. Genesis, yes. Fleetwood Mac when Rumours came out. How harshly people were judged. Meatloaf, God rest his soul. If you were 18 or 19 and into Meatloaf, you were given a wide berth when I was at college. Hotel California by the Eagles, you were going, okay, we quite like Take It to the Limit, still a great song, but come on, Johnny Come Lately and all that stuff. Get a life, mate. And it was always Kids from the Burbs. And as for when Supertramp Breakfast in America came out, I know it's not a genuine offence, but I felt like it should have been. So, there was prejudice against, Genesis. Seconds out with Follow You, Follow Me. Oh, my God.
It's a brilliant song. I don't care. Follow You, Follow Me is a fantastic song.
Okay.
It is.
Right. Yeah. Unless you had to hear it. You've got to remember, though, all those songs on the Fleetwood Mac album, Rumours, were fantastic songs. But it was played to death. You were hearing it every time you switched the radio on in those days. Your ears were kind of bleeding from it.
Yeah.
So it was like sometimes you can literally get too much of a good thing. And the Police were the same. And then I started to hate Blondie because I started DJing 78, 79 at Polly. And so when I was just doing the music in what was the cellar bar at this teacher training college where I was staying, if anyone came up and asked me for the Police or Blondie, I'd give them a Mark E. Smith style reply.
But we've talked about this on the podcast before, and it's kind of similar to what you're saying, just how important music was to people. It was your whole life in a lot of ways. It defined everything about you.
Well, of course, it's almost like it was your touching with culture, because you've got to remember that it's from music and the music you like. So someone like Mark, then he'd talk about books and he'd talk about this. So then you go, I might have a read of that. Oh, I'll have a listen to them. I remember him asking him, what stuff he was listening to at the time. And he put me on to Felt.
Right.
And all that stuff on the Zigzag label.
Yeah.
And so he was always interesting like that, or he'd be talking about, certain books that he'd read or he was reading at the time. And, it made you think, well, I'll be cool and I'll carry. And I was always a big reader anyway. So, you kind of hit on that level. I think everyone really in that era was a reader because, there were 3 channels and there was nothing on the telly at night. Once, it finished early. So you'd always be reading something. It wouldn't necessarily be great or, high-powered stuff, but it'd be, even, all those sort of conspiracy theory stuff, all the anti-vaxxers. Imagine if you bought out Chariot of the Gods now. They've all got their equivalent, haven't they? People.
God, everyone had that, didn't it? Was God an astronaut?
Yeah. 7 million copies or something mad like that.
And it's a fault in that book, and was this a landing runway for alien craft? And there's a photograph.
Yeah, Nazca plane or whatever.
It's 3-4 across that picture.
Yeah. Well, I remember it just across from us from Old Trafford Library on Stretford Road. Somebody had put the graffiti there. If God was an astronaut, what does that make Neil Armstrong?
Hey. That's a bit deep for me.
Very, very deep for Old Trafford, I'm telling you. In our local pub, in the pub quiz, they'd hold up an orange and say, "What colour is that?"
But the colour's named after the fruit. Did you know that? It is. So if you look at robin redbreasts, they're orange, but they didn't have the word orange. The colour orange is named after the fruit, not the other way around.
Oh, and people would have gathered round to have a look at it.
Yeah.
That's what we'll be like after Brexit, won't we, in a few years?
Jesus Christ.
Really? People used to be able to buy these.
I was going to mention, it's nothing really to do with the fall, but how do you find the energy to engage with these Brexit
people on Twitter like that? Yeah.
Do you know what? A lot of it is like doodling in the margin when I've got more important things to do. Part of it is it's a bit like other people do Sudoku. to keep the brain sharp.
Yeah.
And then also, I've got that kind of pointless belligerence in me. And, whether it comes from that kind of Irish thing or just, a lifetime of slights, real or imagined. I get triggered. I've done therapy, mate,
Yeah, well, you need it. Looking by some of the rabbit holes you disappear down with some of them fucking idiots.
I know, but it is quite funny. It does amuse me at times. But yeah, sometimes I do think, oh God, why have I bothered?
It can't be good for you.
They're denser than a neutron star, aren't they?
Well, that's another thing. Bringing it back to the fall, and what Mark did very well with his politics, he never got specific about stuff, so you could never pin stuff like you could on Morrissey, like stupid anti-European beliefs and Brexit and all that. But Mark's sort of political view was that nebulous. He never got called out for anything, did he?
Well, he used to like to annoy everyone. So,
that's right.
Obviously, he wouldn't slag me off for being, I was very far left at the time. But then he talked about going on B15, which was like a youth program on Radio 1 with Adrian Love on. And he was on with all like these students. And this is what made him right. What was the one with, it was like the classical, Tonight on the...
Fortress is about that interview.
Yeah, Tonight on the Vitamin B Glandular Show.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that, and he said when he went on, and all these kids, were all had, anarchy out of a bottle of air gel, and they're all goths. And they all said, well, on blah, 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 you said that you didn't like the Americans. And he said, and he said he just wanted to spoil their party. So he's going, I've never said any such thing about the Americans. In fact, I like the Americans and blah, blah, blah. So going against them just to annoy them, and they were getting all, kind of, how dare you not represent us? And he said they were just trying to get him to attack the system for them, which he always felt was a big middle-class trait.
Yeah.
And there was always that feeling sometimes, when you meet certain people who are quite far left but from very posh backgrounds, is like, the way they would talk about you as being working class was almost as if they wanted you to man the barricades for them.
Yes.
And when you didn't, they hated you, But yeah, so he was interesting like that politically, Mark. And we had a lot of discussions about stuff like that. But I used to just love him going through all the people in the charts at the time, slagging them off. Like when you talk about Ian McCulloch out of Echo the Bunnymen, and he said, well, the trouble with him is he wants to be in the door. No, he thinks he's in the doors. And what made me laugh was then when I was doing Key 103 in 88, 89, McCulloch puts out a solo single, a cover of People Are Strange.
Yeah, I know. Sold out.
You told me that 6 years ago, 5 years ago. You said that about him. So yeah, it'd be quite amusing like that.
Not the worst crime, though, really.
No. It was just quite funny. It was an observance that he'd make about who was copying who. I remember talking about reggae, and he always said that his favourite reggae track at the time was Toots and the Maytals. She's My Scorcher.
Right, okay. Well, he was a big reggae fan. Prince Farah. What was
he likes old soul as well, and even when he did I Dream of Casino Soul, when I was chatting to him about that, he kind of, even though he was attacking, the sort of the whole thing about it, he actually quite liked the fact that it was there. It was something cultural for him to write about.
Definitely, he was a bit of a Northern Soul fan, I think.
Well, he was a culture vulture.
Yeah, he had that same kind of thing with Working Class, where he was fond of it, but not afraid to slag it off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, it was quite funny because he would always try and be a little bit working class Tory with you and all that kind of stuff. But what I used to like about him was, because obviously everyone would be quite pseudy, and I'd been at Polly in London, with all your kind of semi-beatnik types who are all into Susie and the Banshees, and they were the ones who got me into Joy Division, and were always banging on about the fall and stuff like that. And the first experience you had of Manchester being a little bit cool. And but what was interesting is they always had problems with the mums and dads. And whenever I met Mark, and I was like 21, 22, and you always go like this, you go, how's your mum? And I go, yeah, she's fine, blah, 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 blah. But I think it was almost like testing the waters to see if you were all right, because there was a lot of those lads who would think they were trendy, going, oh, my mum and dad, God, what can I tell you? It's just telling. Oh, my God. They're just so different to me.
Yes, indeed. Well, then it turns out with those middle-class people, they're exactly the same as the parents, aren't they? As it turns out, that's the thing. They think they're different, but it turns out they're all exactly the bloody same with each other. But
I suppose it was just. I mean, I suppose when I use a word like middle class in a pejorative way,
yeah,
what I mean was a certain attitude. There was a certain attitude amongst people like that. We were a little bit spoilt,
yeah,
and very jealous. They always seem to be extremely jealous of other people, and it's kind of. Whereas I just had that good old fashioned working class resentment.
It's a much healthier thing to carry on your shoulder, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't. At least my resentment wasn't envy.
Let me tell you about my resentment.
Yes.
Yeah, but the thing about what we're touching about Mark is that liberating thing of not giving a fuck what anybody thought of you.
It was, and it was kind of, but then he didn't give it after a while. I remember,
he had a great life in that way, in the fact that he never answered to anybody.
No, I mean, the weird thing is, he sent me Christmas cards.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? To my mum's house in Old Trafford. The council house. I remember coming back for Christmas 1983, and there's a card there, and it was like that. Is it Wainwright? And it's all sheep in a field, and he put inside it, because he knew he was working on Radio Derby. Obviously, it was like the population of Derby discuss the effects of brine nylon on the local economy. It was little things like this. I wish I'd kept it, but it was kind of made you feel a little bit special.
Yeah.
And even though I always had his phone number, I didn't want to use it because I thought, why would he want to talk to me? And yet, then when I ended up working on the telly and everything, he was like, as if I hadn't spoken to him for years. But I was thinking, I didn't know you wanted to be my mate. Well, do you know what I mean? He was like,
Well, I mean, with that you were saying about the fall being popular, we were kind of, well, certainly when I was in the band, there was never any kind of thing that look at aren't we great, and people really like us. That was like. It was
never. That was never discussed at all.
No,
never discussed there was so many people at that gig. There was so many 100 that night, and isn't this going well or anything like that?
No.
It would have seemed shallow, though, I suppose, and in some ways that wasn't what you were about. You had that thing where everyone thought you were cool. So everything, because I remember, interviewing Gavin Friday, and he was talking about, how much, he was into the Fall, and all the guys out of U2 were into the Fall. And then when I was chatting to Marky Smith about it, I said, Gavin Friday said, blah blah blah, that he'll see. He said, well, why would we give a shit whether he likes us or not?
That was a close personal friend.
Just passing on his good wishes. Sorry if somebody likes you.
Well, that's the thing. In one way, it's massively liberating, but it's not something I can't imagine going through life not caring if people like me. Because the next thing of that is not being nice, isn't it? And because you're nice because you want people to like you. So it's a difficult one to pull off, I think.
I don't know. I mean, I was very badly influenced, I think, at a young age by Mark, and I've been trying to pull back from it. You say things for effect rather than what you meant, and I could never resist the urge to just say horrific things to people in quite powerful positions.
Yeah, well, hoping that the Brexiteers all lose the job because that's what they voted for. That was actually a true story. So there's a guy who does a lot of big building projects in Manchester, and then another guy that ran a big IT company, and that's what they were doing. They were getting rid of Brexiters because it was causing a downturn in their business. And so all the guys have been walking around saying it's Project Fear. They were laying them off first. So I thought, that's good, It's one of those, isn't it? You voted for it. You said you didn't mind short-term pain. Suck it up and have it. But then, of course, that isn't what they really want. Really, it's just a load of right-wing bluster, isn't it? It's a bit like when they compare it to the spirit of the Blitz and all that. And I was thinking, yeah, that's fine, the Blitz spirit. Imagine if you were hunkered down with the bombs going off over your head in some shelter, and the bloke next to you turned around and chuckled and went, "Hey, I voted for this." No, well, the other one I was thinking on was that you got into a bit of hot water with the anti-vaxxers. They should. I know it was a joke, wasn't it? But you've got to be careful.
Yeah, that was just poking the hornet's nest. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of one of those where you just think, where's all this kind of idiocy coming from? I've even got a really good mate of mine actually at the moment. He keeps sending me things on YouTube. I go, he's not a doctor, he's a doctor of philosophy. Bloke is basically someone grifting for follows on YouTube. You know what I mean? He's like Nigel Farage, who once worked in medicine.
Yeah. Nigel Farage, the anti-establishment figure who went to private school, worked in the city, and then never done a day's work in his life. How he's managed to sell himself as anti-establishment, I don't know. Well, there's a few of them, though, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was on a Question Time with Richard Tice, and, he was the one who said that leaving the EU would be simple. Yeah. So I said, everything's simple if you're a bit simple.
Yeah.
So, of course, he hated that, but it was like studied with Brexiters. This was in Darlington, and the report just come out of how bad it would be for the North East, Brexit. And this bloke said, well, the media elite like you, Terry. And I was going, I'm the media elite from a council house in Old Trafford, one of 6 kids. Meanwhile, you've got Richard Tice, who inherited like hundreds of millions off his dad, and he's now got a property empire worth about $500 million. But I'm the media elite.
But
the neutron star.
Yeah, there's a lot of it about, and it's not getting any better, is it?
No. But again, with the 4, what's interesting now is that I go through and I think, where have all my records gone? I've still got some of yours. I've still got Slate's. Right. I've still got, This Nation's Saving Grace. I've still got Part of America. And I've still got Total's Turns.
You've got all the other ones more than me and Paul put together, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I don't know why I flogged them all. I mean, I think a lot of them went to King B, and then I gave some away. But what another thing I do, I never got Mark to autograph any of them. Can you imagine that? Even though I could go out drinking with him, I'd be terrified to think, could you just sign this? It's for my little sister.
But I mean, is that why I think there was a whole thing where they weren't. I mean, I know there's always been collectors and that, but the way people hold records in esteem now, like it's, was that ever the same? Is that not why they're worth money now? Because no one took care of them, did they? The same.
Well, I think in my day, although I was massively into music, I was interested in hearing it. So whether I had it on CD, on cassette, I wasn't bothered as long as I had it to listen to. Yeah. So I wasn't kind of into, like obviously the Northern Soul guys were different. Yeah. They were the ones who collected stuff, and I believe there were blokes who did the same with old blues. But that was it. So I was always interested in just having the record rather than, having the song to be able to listen to. I mean, for me, I remember, going through record shops like Paper Chase and Robinson's and all that in Manchester back in the day, spending whole days in there. I didn't even have it. I just about had enough to get me my bus fare home, but just for the kind of joy of going through them all and looking at, these bands who only in the last 4 years have even bothered to find out what they sounded like, like Molly Hatchet and, with these great covers, Atomic Rooster, Quicksilver Messenger Service, and you go, I wonder what they sound like. That looks really good, that cover. You know what I mean? And, with all the Roger Dean posters and all that kind of stuff. So it was just different. That's why we found out about records by a mate lending you an album. Or you talk to a mate and you go, Elton John is rubbish. Go, no, we are. And then the next day he brings in a copy of, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road or Caribou, and then you've got to bring it home and listen to it so that you can tell him what you think the next day.
Yeah.
Weird.
I know it's all a bit jumpers for goalposts, isn't it? But I think you value music more when it was harder to get hold of, I think. Do you not think?
Well, yeah, you do. I mean that's the weird thing that I say to my kids. I said, the thing is for you, I said, you can access just about any song you want now. And especially on YouTube, that's the place. Spotify, there's still huge gaps on. I said, in our day, we won't have even heard the record. We'd just heard about a record. And you'd have to find it or find someone who knew it. I mean, that's why I had a Northern Soul slot on my Radio Derby show. Every week I've got this guy coming in, bringing in stuff that I could never afford or even hear.
Right.
Or had heard about. And then you'd ask him about a certain song, and he'd go, "No, it's rubbish, that." And I said, "Well, I've heard it's really good." He said, "Those are people who don't know about the scene." On the northern scene, there were the ones who were into the proper soul content, like your Richard Serlins, people like Guy Hennigan later on down the line, who was strictly all 60s, and people who understood what was big in the clubs. And then you get the other ones, it was just almost like semi-novelty records or anything that you could dance to or anything that might pass over. So, it was interesting like that. This is going to be really boring to people out there, isn't it?
No, not at all.
Out about Northern Soul. But, just all that. That's why I love that radio show I did in Derby, because I could find out about jazz funk, I could find out about Northern Soul. I was quite good with reggae anyway, because I grew up in an area, where, our street was basically, you're right, either Irish descent or Jamaican, so it was like, we all had guilt, but we love reggae.
Yeah.
And that was it, because you heard it coming through the walls from the age of 4. Yeah. And so, you just learn even more about it, and then I ended up managing a reggae band in the mid-'80s, funnily enough.
Believe so.
There you go. Every day. Yeah, got them signed to Chrysalis, Junior C Reaction, 12-piece band, ex-Pressure Shocks. Now, they were a band back in the day.
Don't remember that.
They were easy managing a 12-piece band.
Well, it wasn't. It would have been even harder if they'd allowed me to manage them properly, especially since the core of the main 3 were all in their early 30s, and the rest of them were all young lads, 4-piece horn section, but they were absolutely superb.
Right.
Amazing band.
They can't have made much with 12 of them.
No. Well, no, but the thing is, they got signed to Chrysalis. They released 2 singles. When they did their own label one, Cry Jehovah, Love and Emotion. Peel played Cry Jehovah. Janice Long played Love and Emotion. And in a little place like Derby, that was big. It was similar to the Commitments in a way. When you watch that, the ripples they leave there. Although they never put a record out, but it was like that, especially for the black area in Derby, Northampton. Yeah. There was never a band from Manchester, a reggae band, who got signed to a major, except for Harlem Spirit, that one single, Demus in the Moss.
Yeah, blimey. Speaking about talking, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing that. Christ Almighty, that was everywhere. That song,
brilliant song.
Yeah, great, really good. Yeah. But I think it was like the one Manchester reggae single, wasn't it? So everywhere you went, they played it.
Yeah, well, Exodus, English Black Boys was out, but it wasn't quite. It was a bit too slow, and obviously with the lyrics of Demus in the Moss about the sus laws, and then only just over a year after it came out, you had the riots, didn't you, in Moss Side, and one of the causes of it was the sus laws.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Can't say they weren't warned.
No, indeed.
Great record though, Demus in the Moss.
Yeah. So. We're just about to wrap up, so I was just going to ask you, when was the last time you saw Mark then, before? When would that have been?
I don't know. It might have been hanging around with Ed Blaney.
Oh, yeah.
Just recently. The last time I interviewed him was just when he'd done that England's Dreaming, with Shufflebottom. So we were in the Atlas Bar for about, 3 hours.
Right.
Half an hour, that was the interview, and the rest of it was just chatting and drinking. And then, of course, he was big mates with my mate Johnny J.
Right.
You say you hadn't heard of, but he produced the Dose single that he did. And him and Mark got on really well because...
Well, you didn't know him, Steve, would you?
Yes, I know him, yeah.
Yeah. So, you see...
I got edited out, but I did play on it.
Yeah. Well, Mark thought Johnny was very professional, and Johnny thought Mark was very professional. You know what I mean? Both had that kind of cheap, Salford thing going on of let's do it. Do it.
Right.
And that was it.
Right. Well, I think we've come to the end of our hour's slot. It's been great to talk to you, Terry. Sorry we couldn't get any work, chat out here, but we'll try and edit that together for a cozy 10 minutes. I
feel like I've not talked about Mark enough because I've spent so much time with him.
No, at all. No, you talk about what you like, mate. It's only, it might be a fold podcast, but it doesn't mean that's all we talk about. It was great to speak to you.
All right, brilliant. Hey, fantastic to speak to you.
So, next time we'll have to get out for a pint. So we've said this to everybody who's come on. There's going to be some night out this when we go out for this pint, but going to have to hire somewhere, I think.
Yes, definitely. Or I'll get you on my next radio show. In fact, I need to interview anyway because I'm doing a Manchester music book covering black people as well.
Good. What time somebody did.
And I'm also doing one about being Irish descent. So I can double bubble you both, can't I?
You're on. All right, mate.
Yeah.
All right.
Some good intelligent quotes going on.
Well, we'll do our best. All right, good to speak to you, mate. Take care.
All right.
I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, man.
See ya.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
God bless.
Thanks for joining us this week on Oh Brother. Episodes are released every second Monday, so watch for the next episode in 2 weeks. Follow us on Twitter at Oh Brother Show, where you can find a link to all our previous episodes on Spotify, iTunes and YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating on iTunes and tell your friends about us. You can also check out our books about the fall, The Big Midweek and Have a Bleeding Guess, available from Root Publishers and all good bookstores. Hope to see you all again soon, and remember, if you're driving, take your car. Ta-ra.